Thank you.
Hey guys, I'm Brendan Bowe, this is Tanisha, this is Amanda, and our project focused on opiate addiction. Our big mission, how can we support individuals living with opiate or opioid addiction on their path to recovery? Specifically, we focused on addicts in Indiana because that is the effort of the Grand Challenge. So at a grand level, what is opiate or opioid addiction? Opioids are things that activate opioid receptors in your brain. They're typically used for painkillers. Obviously the ones you've probably heard of, opium, heroin, fentanyl, oxycodone, hydrocodone. There's other ones, you might know them by their brand names like Valium, codeine. Opiate addicts are physically and psychologically dependent on these drugs, as identified in the next slide. This is what one of our interviewees said. So I mean, I'll let you read it. It's a little longer. But this interviewee was actually using heroin every day, multiple times per day, but most of the time he didn't actually do it to get high. He actually just did it to work off his physical dependency issues. So he's using it at work, he's using it at his home, but not to get high. He usually only does that on the weekends because then it's like a fun time. But he realized he was physically dependent when one day he went to work and he was actually, thought he was coming down with like food sickness. He was getting kind of shaky and hot and nervous, but then he realized that he was actually just really craving heroin. He had to leave early work to get to his dealer and buy heroin. He'd just been using a little bit every day since.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about some of the larger scale facts. So here are some like fast facts. So in the US, greater than 2.5 million individuals actually struggle with substance abuse disorders related to opioids. And drug overdose currently is actually the leading cause of accidental death in the US today. Of the 52,000 lethal drug overdoses that occurred in 2015, actually over 60% of them were tied back to abusing an opiate or opioid. So let's bring it back to Indiana. The national average, about 19.7 deaths per 100,000 deaths nationally are related to opiates. But in Indiana, it's actually 23 deaths per 100,000. And also in Indiana, about 84.6% of people who need addiction treatment don't receive it at all. That also, wait. That's not just like a pretty flower, it's an opium poppy. Okay. Oh wait, no, this is still me, sorry. Yeah, so why does it matter? So long-term frequent usage of these substances can have severely debilitating mental, physical, and emotional health consequences for the individual. But it also affects us larger as an entire society. So drug abuse and addiction also has huge side effects on us with higher rates of crime, higher rates of hospitalization, child abuse, child neglect, and also lowered labor and employee productivity, which costs our economy millions of dollars a year. From our observations, we were able to find, though, that there's a lot of financial constraints, lack of awareness and education about local resources, and obviously the huge negative social stigma that exists that prevent people from actually making successful recoveries.
Our proposed solution focused on the fact that there is a severe lack of information for opiate addicts in regards to how to get clean. So obviously you can go on the internet and you can find all of these ways to get clean, all of these help centers, but there's a gap in how do I go from where I am now to where I need to be. I took this quote also from the same interviewee that we were talking about earlier. We all have our demons, mine just happens to be heroin. I'm not much different than you or anyone else. These people feel stigmatized by non-addicts, and also in a way, non-addicts are also stigmatized by them. When I was approaching these people to ask if I could interview them, they saw me as somebody who, to quote them, wearing one of those graduation hats in a lab jacket, looking at them like they're animals in a zoo. And so even though I wasn't being overtly leering at these people, like lording over them, they still felt that way just from the way that maybe my tone or the way that we talk about addiction versus the way that they feel addiction. So our proposed solution was really focused on how can we take getting clean and sort of make it a manageable thing that you do, like, oh, I'm gonna get clean today. I'm gonna take out my phone and that's what I'm gonna do.
So through our interviewees, we kind of went through the design phase, and we picked out colors that we felt the user would be happy with and feel calm with and feel welcomed, because that's what they felt they needed the most. So then we did a rough draft of what our wireframes would look like, and we did our from the beginning to the end and how our user would experience our app, and then we came up with the logo, which is CREW, which stands for Clean Recovery Uplift. So here is the prototype demo. Sure. So the way that our user would go through is they can either, if they're already signed up, then they would automatically just go into login, but I can show you the sign-in page. So they'll type in their full name, email, give themselves a username, because we found through a lot of interviews they want to be called differently or not approached as who they really are. And then their role. So professionals can also join the app to help addicts. So that's where they would put professional or counselor or just an addict. And then their age. So when they are signed up, they have a variety of different options. They can go to their profile, which has all their information that they signed up with. And then they have a journaling app, which helps them just express their ideas of what they went through throughout the day, or just goals that they have that they wanted to write down. They can also talk to the people that they end up matching with. The message is just like any other messaging app that you would see on your phone. And then they would see their history from what they've done in the previous. And then they can see their team that they've added. So the way it would work, it's kind of like Tinder. So they would go through a list of people around them, or they can change the way that they can find people with age range, their gender, or location. And then if they want to see more info, there's about location, what their likes and dislikes are, and who they share friends with. And then they can see different photos, just like Tinder. And then if they do decide to add them and they end up matching, they get crewed up.
The big thing here is that we're looking to connect people so that we can reduce the stigma, and also we have the hope that physicians, psychologists, other people who work in the addiction business can reach out to people and say, hey, I know you're on this app, you probably want to get clean. My business is opening I have 3 new spots for clients. Do you want to come in next week and see if we can help you get you on this Suboxone program or Narcotics Anonymous program, things like that. Do we have any questions?
Not really a question or a comment. Like, for your presentation, like, I would make it so you did like an excellent job of like explaining like, you know, the problem of these are like actual people who have issues, right? Mm-hmm. The second part should, I feel like, you know, explain more about the like what the solution entails for someone, rather because we moved right into the application. Mm-hmm. So I had like a moment where I was lost, like, oh, well, you're making like, it was like a social networking app.
Yes.
And I didn't see that connection between the two until like near the end, where you started explaining, like, okay, it's a social connection app between those people so they can explain to each other and like have this community or network together. Mm-hmm. So I feel like, you know, if you had that like a little before them, that would be like more helpful for the overall circle of understanding what your application idea is for.
Thank you.
Could you tell me a little bit more about your interview process, kind of how you found these types of people?
I don't care.
I mean, we can go.
Yeah.
We can go panel.
It was actually really difficult, believe it or not. A lot of privacy errors occurred. I did Facebook, and then I interviewed someone at a recovery place. He was really friendly, actually, and he was actually in recovery as well, but a counselor as well. But we found it really difficult because of that privacy, and like what he said, people feel like we see them differently than just regular human beings, so they didn't want to be interviewed. But then also we had those people that were really open.
I found my people from the R Opiates subreddit. I messaged the moderators there, and they allowed me to put a post up that said, hey, I'm a graduate student looking to interview. If you'd like to contact me, here's how to do it. A lot of the people, actually all of them that I interviewed, wanted to be talked to on a encrypted or secure messaging application. So I've downloaded a few of those, Signal, Wicker. That's how a lot of these people talk to each other, because they don't want to be found out either from their family or from, friends. The guy who uses heroin at work, his employers don't know or anything. So he wants end-to-end encryption to try and keep it separate from all of his other conversations, which is another feature of the app.
I interviewed a professional, so it didn't apply to me as specifically.
You have one more question?
Yeah, so one's a comment and the other's a question. So I guess I'm curious how you feel that this would reduce stigma, and then at the same time the term addict actually perpetuates stigma, but you use it throughout the UI. I would think that, active addiction is typically the nomenclature that they'll use when providing treatment. And I think you have to be careful with the way that you present getting clean. Right, recovery is a process. Most people relapse 6 or 7 times. That's pretty common. I think the idea of connecting individuals in active addiction with counselors through something like that's a really good idea, because it's a space that's not been used. But to what you've said, a lot of individuals in treatment are either shunned by family members or embarrassed to be in treatment, or they've been in it for so long that the cycle has perpetuated itself.
Right. One of the guys that we were talking to actually said that he does not want to go on a methadone program because then he's just trading one of his addictions for the other. He also said that his idea of clean, because everybody has a different idea of what clean is, his idea of clean is actually just getting rid of his physical dependence so that he can still use the heroin on the weekends for fun, but not have to deal with it every day.
Sure.
So,
well, and at that point, he's probably, I would think, using heroin to not have withdrawal. He's not actually getting high anymore.
Exactly.
I mean, I treated people with the same situation where they just used, most of them in active addiction used to feel normal.
Right.
To feel like how you feel right now.
And the way that our app works is we want them to be surrounded by people that understand what they're going through, and that's why we picked like a Tinder app. So they're all mostly addicts or professionals that understand what they're going through, and that would help them ask them if they're doing what their goals were for that time, and be able in a welcoming environment.
I'm sorry, just to piggyback, so are people in active addiction on the app as well as counselors?
Yes. Yes.
So do you not think that somebody like a police officer or anyone else who doesn't care about people getting treatment could access that and target people? Because having worked at a methadone clinic and a Suboxone clinic, this was an issue that was constant, where police officers would sit outside the proximity of the department and pull people over.
That's actually a good point that we hadn't considered. The one thing that I would think was we weren't putting it in the profile itself. It's not separated addicts and professionals. It would be profiles themselves. So then if somebody tries to add you and then you add them and you're messaging back and forth and you think that they're a cop, there's nothing stopping you from unadding them or just not talking to them.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from though, and that's actually something that we considered. I think we didn't get to that slide, but that was possible problems with the device.
All right, you can talk to them afterwards. Thank you so much.